What they're really frustrated with is the environment with which medicine is practiced. In other words, all of the working conditions of the NHS. And I think all of these things that compound together, which lead to doctors feeling undervalued. I don't think that the BMA or even the government have really got a handle on this. What it really relates to is the fact that there doesn't seem to be a fair exchange of value for the level of commitment and the level of responsibility that doctors face, of which I think personally, a lot of it is non-monetary. Welcome to Medics in Control, the podcast for doctors who want more control over their time, money, and direction without leaving medicine. I'm Jamie Gross, NHS consultant and founder of Medics in Control, and I'm joined by certified money coach Fanny Snaith. This podcast is about creating the headspace to think more clearly, ask better questions, and build a way of living and working that actually feels aligned. Each week, we talk about the things that sit in the background for a lot of doctors: money, mindset, direction, and that sense that life can quietly drift if you're not paying attention. So if you've worked hard to build a career in medicine but don't quite feel how you expected to, you're definitely in the right place. Let's get into today's episode. Fanny, at the time of recording, we are day 2 of a 6-day strike from resident doctors.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be I don't know when this podcast is going out, but I thought it'd be a really great opportunity to talk about this a bit more detail, because it's quite clear to me that the medical profession is not a particularly happy place at the moment. And then that raises the question, is this purely about pay, or is there something deeper going on? But before we start, I mean, you're not a doctor. So no. I suppose you're looking at it from the layperson, and you speak to lots of people as well. Mm-hmm. What is your understanding about the strike, and what is your feeling towards it?
So if I was really talking from somebody who doesn't talk to you very much, I've got a funny feeling that the general public are just thinking that doctors are greedily asking for more money.
Right.
For more money. Knowing that they have already had a what sounds like a whopping pay increase. This is the thing. It's like, I don't know, what do they say? Was it something like 26% or something? That we listen to these figures. It really annoys me, actually, because it's very similar to when they talk about the energy prices. They say, and the energy prices have gone up, which means it's going to cost an extra £204 per household. How can they say, do you know what I mean? It's like people throw these figures around and we all jump on these bandwagons, but actually, what does it really mean? Is it, I think there's a lack of clarity around it. And I think that what that does to the general public is all they see is doctors are already paid shed loads of money compared to the average salary, which is now about 40,000 as of talking. They're already paid a lot of money and they just want more, and they've already had a big pay rise. So what the hell's the problem? And by the way, when I phone up to try and get a doctor's appointment or get my hospital appointment, I'm delayed, and I don't get what I want. And when I go to the hospital, I sit in a corridor. Mm. I think that is quite a general feeling.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? Because if we look back at the pandemic, obviously we all remember the clap for carers. Doctors were very, very, very high public regard. I think when they started the strike action 3 years ago, I think was the first strike from the resident doctors. There was a lot of public support at that time. And then it seems that, at the time of this current strike, this is the 15th strike from resident doctors, which is a hell of a lot when you come to think about the last 3. It's only over the last 3 years. But there definitely seems to be a dwindling of public support from those strikes. And then if you're thinking about the political game, and this isn't a political podcast, but if you're thinking about the political game, once you've lost that public support, then your negotiating hand anyway is going to be a lot weaker, understandably, isn't it? I suppose I just want to fill in. I mean, listen, the BMA's views are the BMA's views. I'm not a resident doctor, I'm a consultant. But interestingly, consultants are also, at the moment, in they're going to be voting whether they're in favour of industrial action themselves.
Right.
And I'm personally not in that camp. I'm not one that is necessarily agreeing with the strike action. From their point of view, let's talk about resident doctors for now, because resident doctors are slightly different. They will argue that the cost of medical training is and the cost of living going through that rigorous training at medical school is very high. They're all coming out from university with hundreds of £1,000s worth of debts, which is going to take a long time to repay. And then there's been gradual pay erosion year on year on year, and the government haven't recognised that. That's what the BMA will be saying.
Right. Can I just ask a couple of questions there?
Yeah,
I'm guessing that
it's not my view. I'm just saying,
No. But when medics go through university, do all their training, etc., they have exactly the same payback rules as anybody else that's been to university. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, but being a doctor takes longer. You go medical school is 5 years.
It makes no difference. My daughter's training to become a lawyer, and it's like her training's on. But the rule to use the university payback thing, right? If you earn over a certain amount of money, which I think currently, depending on when you trained, let's say the latest rule is you've got to earn £25,000 a year before you start paying back anything on your student loan, and then it's charged at 9% on every 1,000 above that, right? So for every 1,000 you earn above 25,000, you're going to pay £90 per year. Now we know that behind the scenes, the interest that's being applied to the loan that you took is just stupidly ridiculous, and that actually you can't really pay it off faster unless you're in quite a high paying job. They're the people that come off the worst. But I don't want to get into all this, how we pay back student loan. But the general rule of thumb is it doesn't matter how much you borrow, it's not what you pay. It never is for anybody. So I would say, let's forget about the uni card, because it's not fair, because everybody's in the same playing field, whether you're a medic or whether you're not. But I would also go to say that veterinaries, architects, lawyers, all of those other professions which have to do really stringent training, and forgive me if I've forgotten your anybody else's profession that takes a lot of training, it's going to be the same story. So let's ditch that card. Okay. I don't think we can think about that.
Oh, fine. So if it's not that, then what else could it be? Why is it? Are we seeing something? Are we seeing a cultural shift? Are we seeing a generational shift? One thing that's clear, though. See, I've got my own views on this. I don't think this is just about pay. I think the BMA are using money as a vehicle to really communicate. Maybe it's not the right way, and as I say, I think there's a better approach to it than what the BMA are doing personally. But what I see is this constant theme of doctors being undervalued. And if you think about money, thinking about money in its purest form, what is money? Well, money is a tool. Take the emotion away, take all the things that we've spoken about before about your relationships with money and things like that. But money is essentially a tool that allows exchange of value from one person or one institution or one body to another. And so if doctors feel that if they feel undervalued for whatever reason, then what they're basically saying is that their time is worth more than they are being remunerated for, whether that be pay or whether it be something else. Because when you look at it, doctors have to pay to park at work. Food, I mean, things have eroded over time. I'm not saying what's right and what's wrong, but when I was a house officer, my first year as a doctor, hospital accommodation was free, so we didn't have to pay for the first year. That was taken away. We've got a situation where some of the hospital food, the canteen food, was heavily subsidised, which seems to have not now be the case. Maybe some places it is, some places it isn't. Doctors have to pay to park at work. They've lost their on-call facilities. So when I was training, we used to have a doctor's mess, we used to have a pool table, a television, we used to have a bar. So when you finished after work, you used to have drinks with everything else. They've all pretty much gone. Because everything is now moved over to shift work, the on-call rooms with the proper rest facilities, they've all been gone and they've been turned into other clinical areas or office spaces, but they're largely gone as well. And so it just seems that when I compare the working conditions of doctors now compared to what they were when I started 22 years ago, things have definitely got worse over time.
Right. Because this is really interesting. Because I was listening to you while you were talking, and everything that you've said is valid, because it's like when I started as a doctor, I had this basket of goodies that came along with my salary.
Yeah.
And now the basket of goodies has diminished, albeit gone pretty much. And I haven't had a pay rise for many, many years. And you paying me an extra 26% sort of doesn't really make up for it, and I'm still feeling out of pocket. Noted. I'm going to say noted, okay? And I completely understand, and I understand how you feel. Now, whether this is relevant or whether it's not, I don't know. So when I worked in corporate 22 years ago, well, it was actually a bit more than that, but still, I used to get a nice salary. Probably, we used to get travel, obviously hardly cost anything, used to come in on the tube. I obviously had to pay my own travel. 6 o'clock, the drinks would come out. We'd have nights out with dinners given to us by our bosses. We'd have a couple of corporate events every year, maybe team building days or, some other fun days, etc. And we'd have all these, maybe a gym perk, going to get gym membership, all those kind of things. And actually, over the years, all of those have slipped away, and I haven't had much of a pay increase either. So I think the first thing to recognise is that what's going on in the medical profession has also been going on in other places. Not every place, but in other places. So I also was thinking, while you were talking as a doctor or a consultant, I'm guessing that the nurses also have to pay or didn't have to pay for those things way back when. And let's face it, they're not paid huge amounts of money. So, just to put a little bit into the balance there of the outside. However, nothing takes away from the fact that if you're there standing in the hospital with your white coat on, your stethoscope round your neck, and you're feeling undervalued and you don't feel that you're getting as much as you should for what you're given. I would also like to throw into the mix that the NHS is a non-profit.
Well, it's a public service. It's a public service, isn't it?
It's a public service, right? It's not, exactly, it's not a corporate company.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful as to how much people are paid as well, in the fact that it's and you say, let's take the emotion out of money. It's a very nice thing to sort of think about for a moment, but in reality I don't know if it can ever be the case. I mean, I always go back to my favourite quote from Ayn Rand: money is simply a tool. It will take us wherever we wish to go, but it will not replace us as the driver. So you can't really take the emotion out of money. And I, you know,
Yeah, no, I see your point. I tell you what's coming up for me here is because the government are now talking about whether they want to ban strike action and put a ban on it. Now, again, I think the scope of that conversation, that's another podcast in itself.
because the police aren't allowed to strike, are
Right,
they?
exactly. The fact of the matter is, whether it doesn't matter what we think, whether we think it's the right thing to strike or whether it's not, whether it's about pay, whether it's about something else, whether you're talking about the basket of goodies being taken away, whether that's right or wrong. Forget about that. The fact of the matter is that the medical profession is not happy and they feel undervalued. Now, if they feel undervalued, what's going to happen? They're going to either continue to get stressed, well, maybe not stressed, resentful. And then you think to yourself, are they going to give the best possible care they can if they're chronically in this stressed, frustrated, or resentful mode? We've got colleagues that may be closer to retirement, think to themselves, I can't be dealing with this anymore. I'm just going to retire early. You're going to have people that have invitations from Australia, New Zealand. Nothing against them, of course, those countries. But they may see better opportunities abroad.
Absolutely.
Or you're going to get situations, I suppose that happened to me. I'm not saying that me feeling undervalued is the reason for it necessarily, but that chronic stress can then spill over into personal life, and that can contribute to burnout. And then you're going to get colleagues that go off sick, maybe for genuine reasons, but you may also get doctors that might have a sniffle, whereas before they would have gone in and just braved it, who would say, well, sod that, I'm not going to do that anymore because you know what, why should I? Because the system doesn't care about me anyway. So these are genuine things. And this is something that the government, I don't think I've really picked up on. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong. The fact of the matter is a feeling, and we talk about this in Medics in Control, don't we? A feeling is a feeling. And all feelings are true to that particular person.
They are.
That group of people. So the fact of the matter is we've got a profession who feel undervalued.
Yeah.
And so therefore, my concern is if things don't change, what's going to happen? Well, potentially we're going to see a mass exodus. We're going to see real pressures on the workforce. People won't want to do medicine, or people that are in medicine will look for reasons to leave. And then where does that leave the health service where, you know, let's suppose in 10 years' time, you or I or our families were looking for that healthcare. Well, if there's no doctors there to look after the patient, so they're not the best version of themselves, what does that mean for everyone?
No, I get that. And that's why I suppose doctors hold a bit of a trump card. But you know what, Jamie, and I think this is the sad thing, is that almost everywhere I look, it's always, everything just comes down to the money. Schools, fire service, police service, corporate, jury trials, everywhere everything seems to be squished with money, about money, that the figures just simply don't add up. And it's like partner that with bad management. Going to stick my neck out there.
No, we're going to talk about this in another time. The bureaucracy of the NHS is something which is
the waste of money.
I think it's crippling the NHS personally. Yes. We can talk about it another time. But yeah, carry on.
But we're in a situation whereby, okay, let me ask you about this. Had anybody really decided, or is there real clarity about what would make the doctors happy? Is that actually clear?
Well, it's really interesting because the BMA will go on and they'll say, well, who is in support of industrial action? And obviously it gets framed that there's been pay erosion for years and blah, 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 blah. But if I'm being totally honest with you, and we get these surveys, you've got the NHS staff survey, but the problem with these surveys, and they're tick box exercises, and they're very, very weighted towards numbers and statistics. And I suppose going back to your point that you've raised before, you're talking about it always comes back to money. Well, it comes back to money because it's very quantifiable. Okay, right. It's quite black and white. Where the real value is, in my opinion, is actually more of the qualitative information that really relates to how people feel.
Absolutely.
What really what's really interesting here is that instead of having a survey where you're ticking boxes depending on categories or numbers and things like that, what's really needed is it almost needs some focus group exercises or some genuine conversations to say, well, okay, what's actually occurring for you at the moment? And you said that you're frustrated in a medical career. Well, what actually is it that's causing you to be frustrated? Now, I can give you a number of reasons, because I've been speaking to doctors for the last year and a half about these issues, and these issues are what we spoke about quite extensively. So things like high admin burden, bureaucracy, lots of tick box exercises, the hierarchical structure of the NHS, and being imposed to do things rather than not having an opportunity to voice an opinion, being a yes person, all of those sort of things, which contribute.
Not be able to give the patient the kind of care that you really want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you're a doctor and you're leading,
the emotional burden of that.
Yeah, exactly. And working with clunky IT systems that may serve the organization but don't serve the individuals, all of those sort of things. So I don't think you can take anything in isolation.
No,
I think all of these together make being a doctor really, really challenging in today's world. And what's really interesting here is that if you was to strip everything back and it goes back to the patient, most doctors really still are passionate about the clinical side of medicine. What they're really frustrated with is the environment with which medicine is practiced. In other words, all of the working conditions of the NHS. And I think all of these things that compound together, which lead to doctors feeling undervalued. Now, these are situations, these are things that are maybe difficult to quantify. So going back to your original question, I don't think that the BMA or even the government have really got a handle on this, because what it really relates to, yes, you could argue that doctors are underpaid for what they used to be and there's been pay erosion. But for me, what it really relates to is the fact that there doesn't seem to be a fair exchange of value for the level of commitment and the level of responsibility that doctors face, of which I think personally a lot of it is non-monetary.
No, and we know, because of the work that we do, we know about fair exchange. Let's just explain it for a moment. That fair exchange, and it sounds obvious, but I don't think we think about it often enough, is when both parties feel that they have got a good deal, basically. It's a proper win-win.
Yeah, right. It's a win-win. Exactly.
It's a win-win. And so when one party feels out of sorts with it, then the fair exchange the fair exchange feeling slides away. And we start to feel disgruntled or discombobulated or upscuttled, as my mother would have said. So, and that's all good. But I think that you're absolutely right in that we said, is it just about the pay? That's what we were talking about at the beginning. No, it's not, in my opinion. I'm not in the medical profession. I talk to more and more doctors every day, quite deeply, actually, as it goes. However, from Joe Public's point of view, why don't we know that it's not just about the pay more? Because I think if you want to have support from the general public, which is so important, I think, for you guys right now, is you need to make us, who are the patients, understand that it isn't just about the money. That seems to me to be the important slot right now.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with you. And so based on what you're saying, the question back to you is, do we think that the BMA, which are the union that's representative of doctors, have they missed a trick?
Yes, they have, because I'm going to stand up for this as well, because I spend quite a lot of time with LBC Radio on in the kitchen, which is the London Broadcasting Corporation, and it's just a talk show. And they talk about everything, and it's usually pretty straight talk. And there isn't enough about the doctors. When the strike starts, they'll have a few doctors phoning in saying a few little things and all. But that's just one place. I don't really hear it that much in the public eye, like on Radio 4 or wherever we get our news from. Where is the proper voice from the BMA that says more than we just want more money? I don't hear it.
No,
and I don't think it's there.
No, it might not be. And the problem is, you talked about a win-win, a fair exchange of value. At the moment, all I can see is a lose-lose. Because if you think about it, if the public support is diminishing, doctors are continuing to put up a front saying, we don't care, we're going to continue with this because we feel that we're still underpaid for what we do. If you think about it from a logical perspective, the idea of forcing the government's hand to anything what are politicians really motivated by? They're largely driven by public votes. Now, if the public are less on the doctor's side and more on the government side, it's very easy for the government. They'll just say no. And then it's very easy then for the government then to shift the blame onto doctors. What's really interesting about all this is the fact that, you spoke earlier, I don't know if it was this episode or previous episode, but you spoke earlier about the frustrations that came with the NHS and everything else. Well, if there's that minor irritation because of some sort of systemic inefficiency, that's just going to be magnified. And who's going to be taking the brunt of that in the future? Well, it's going to be the doctors, because it's going to be the greedy doctors. So I don't think it helps the medical profession either, if I'm being honest with you. And I just can't see, they're talking about, and I don't know where the figure comes from, they're talking about the strike action so far has cost the government or the public purse £3 billion. I have no idea where that comes from, but let's be honest with ourselves, it's not cost neutral either. And then you think to yourself, well, what actually is the purpose? What is the end goal here?
Well, you know what? There's another interesting point, which I think is quite, again, to throw into the mix. So I know from a public point of view that this particular strike action, unless it was called off, there were going to be 1,000 training places pulled by the government, right? Which I thought was funny because I, as an insider, I have a little bit of insider knowledge, or just because I talk to you. So 1,000 less training places for doctors, which is like stupid because obviously then it's... But I'm talking to doctors who are finding it hard to get jobs. Yeah, I know. Well, that's another because of the cuts. Another situation. Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely ridiculous, actually. There's something... Listen, I don't know why this is the case, but think about it. You've got an increasing demand on the healthcare service. The healthcare service has never been more stretched in terms of its demand placed on it since it was started... In 1945. In 1945, yeah, exactly, after the Second World War. Obviously, that's because people are living longer, they've got more comorbidities, etc., etc. And yet, despite this, there seems to be a shortage of training posts, and there's lots of resident doctors who can't find work, which is absolutely ridiculous. And that really probably goes back to something I probably should have spoken about right at the beginning of this episode. That's another thing. If you're a doctor and you've done your training for 5 years and you've gone through medical school and you've gone through exams and you may have started at the first or second year of a doctor, you've got to do night shifts, you've got to say no to family events because you've got to work on the weekend, overnight shifts and all that sort of stuff. All of a sudden, it's April 2026, and then you're looking at August 2027, and there's no job available, and then you're stressed because you don't know where you're going to find your job. You don't know. We haven't even talked about having a job in a desired location. I mean, doctors, you have to almost give up everything, your personal situation, because I'm living in London now, but the only opportunity, the only job available might be in Newcastle. We've seen this. Okay. So that doesn't get spoken about enough either. Doctors have lives. It's not just about... So what words come to mind for me? You know, because it sounds to well, all this, if we put all of this together in a big melting pot, there's two words that are coming to me. White elephant. That the NHS has become this kind of beast that has to be there, valued, loved, and I'd like to say cared for. However, do you know the history of a white elephant?
No.
Used to be in India, you used to give somebody a white elephant if you didn't really value them or like them, because a white elephant is a very cherished animal. This is my belief, this is what I read somewhere anyway. A white elephant is like an amazing animal, but you can't put it to work. So it's like it's going to be a very expensive kind of toy. You go, oh my God, thank you so much for my white elephant. Oh Christ, what am I going to do with this thing now? And it's almost like the NHS is this thing that we're so determined to keep, that we're so determined that it's got to be this jewel in the crown of England. And yet, everything that we're saying about it right now is pointing to the fact that it needs ripping to pieces and rebuilding back together again, isn't it?
Yeah, it probably does, but who's going to do it? That's almost guaranteed. This is the problem. For the NHS, for things to genuinely change for the better, it needs to be dissociated from political influence.
But it can't be, because it's to do with money and it's
on the
to
public.
do with money and taxes and
that's right. That's right. So this is a continuous, and so this brings me back to the point, and this is probably the purpose of this episode. We can talk about this till we're blue in the face. Nothing changes. So what we're really looking for, and what we're standing for at Medics in Control, as you know, is the fact that, okay, fine, the NHS is the NHS. You mentioned previously about it's a massive oil tanker, which is very, very difficult to control.
And very difficult, slow to turn around.
Very, very difficult to slow to turn around. Okay. Now we could give all of our energy and time to try and fight the system.
And rant about it.
Like we've done on this show.
Oh, it's been fun.
Or, and listen, it's okay to do once in a while because it's good to, hear other people's opinions and things like that. Or we can say to ourselves, you know what, the NHS isn't changing anytime soon. The government are not going to give in. Things are what they are. If we can just accept things for what they are, and then what can we do internally to reclaim that sense of control? If we're feeling undervalued, how can we feel more valued? And
by working on ourselves.
And I think this is kind of the message from this, because these are really interesting points, and I'm not saying we should ignore these conversations, because I think it's important. That's why we've been discussing it. But for me, this is where I think this is really a place where doctors can really tap into.
Well, it's going back to that. It's going back to people getting very anxious and fearful and all the things that used to come out during COVID. And I know that doctors got the brunt of a lot of it. But everybody was seeing these diagrams of what we can control and what we can't control. In my world, we call it our internal locus of control and our external locus of control. We control ourselves. We can control how we are as people, what's going on in our brains, how we steady the ship, as it were. You can't control what's going in the NHS. So it's really how you meet the NHS. Are you going to meet it as a place that just completely discombobulates you and pulls you to pieces? Or are you going to meet it as somebody who knows that they're going into a difficult situation and you're going to do the best you can with everything that you've got, but be very, very steady within yourself? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing about having that steadiness within yourself.
Great.
One day I would love to get on this podcast, I would love to get a doctor from Médecins Sans Frontières, because every day they go into a war zone or somewhere that's like, to all intents and purposes, hideous, right? And I would love to know how they do it. And I'm not saying that we should just put up and shut up with whatever we're going to do. But if you're in a situation whereby you can't walk away, like you can't just go, I'm walking out of here tomorrow, or you're making a decision to sort of go, well, I'm going to stay, then stay strong. Don't be in this environment where you're weak and vulnerable and are going to fall to bits. There's got to be some kind of internal resilience built up within you so that you can cope with this situation. Because if not, you're just going to drive yourself insane.
Mm.
I think that's the thing. And we're going to talk about this a lot more. But is it all about the money? Nah.
No. Well, hopefully that's been of value. And we will continue the discussion another time.
Definitely fun.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah. Thanks, Fanny. We'll speak soon. Thank you for listening to Medics in Control. If this episode resonated, feel free to follow the podcast or share it with someone else in medicine who might get something from it. And if you'd like to explore more, you can join the Medics in Control network, www.medicsincontrol.com/Medics in Control-network. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next episode.